Welcome back. This is the part 2 of Unit 0 background information, which is about syllables. For your information, if you didn't watch the part 1 video, I highly recommend you to watch it first before you continue with this part 2 video. Anyway, a syllable is a unit that could be the same or bigger than a sound. Since a syllable usually consists of vowels and consonants and sometimes contains one of them, as well as the one that could be the same or smaller than a word, because a word can be composed by one or more syllables. From the lesson procedure, I feel the background information on syllables is necessary in advance to practice identifying syllables in words and syllables in sentences. Before I begin, I would like to seek for your understanding that for today, my focus is on both vowels and consonants. Just like last time, here are some questions to think about before we continue. 1. How is the English syllabic structure different to the Korean syllabic structure? 2. Are the number of vowels equivalent to the number of syllables? 3. How can we split a multi-syllabic word into the syllables? Feel free to pause this video to think about these questions. Now, let's take a look at the first question, which is about comparing and contrasting the English and Korean syllabic structures. What I can say to begin is that for both English and Korean, as for many other languages, a syllable can be split up into the onset and the rhyme can also be subdivided into the nucleus and the coda. And the bracket indicates that these are optional, which in fact leaves the nucleus as the must-have component. To re-illustrate it, a syllable with the minimum number of components would have a nucleus only. A syllable with the maximum number of components would have both the onset and the coda besides the nucleus. And in between them, the possible options are either onset plus nucleus or nucleus plus coda. Then, what does each component mean? To figure out what does nucleus mean first, since it has most frequently appeared, you might want to recall the part that I was comparing and contrasting vowels and consonants. Which one was the one that can usually act as a syllable on its own? Yes, it was vowel, which I will write as a V. So, a nucleus is actually a vowel in a syllable. Then, what would the onset and the coda be? At the basic stage, each of them could take one consonant, which I will be writing as C's, each with a bracket to indicate that they are optional. And up to this stage, the structure is equally acceptable in both English and Korean. However, there's something that works differently in English from now on, which could cause the Korean learners of English struggle. Korean syllable maintains this basic structure, with having one consonant on each side at the most, like these words on the screen. In fact, even for the first and third example, I feel it has a default onset inserted. Whereas in English syllable, the onset can take up to 3 consonants, and the coda can take up to 4 consonants. Here are the examples of the basic monosyllabic words, and then some more complicated ones that do not work in Korean. Here, what you need to note is that just like I mentioned in the part 1, I'm focusing on sounds. So, if you just see the letters, which I will write in lower cases when necessary, it looks like this. But when these are transcribed in their sounds, we can see that they match the structures written on the left side. Since pronunciation is about knowing how the words are sounded out, I believe that being able to switch the letters into sounds immediately is very important. Therefore, it will be practiced intensively throughout this course, so that ultimately you can transcribe the sounds with only a little aid of a dictionary. Also, another little note is that for the first 3 examples here, the number of consonant sounds will be a bit different if an R is added behind the R. Anyway, getting back on track, shall we see how these may sound like in Korean transcriptions? To leave the differences in sounds aside and focus on syllabic structure, it looks like this. What do you notice? Do you notice that the number of vowels has increased next to the consonant sounds without their vowel sound partners? Let's also look back at the English words with the basic structures. This time, the first 2 are equivalent, but you can still see that the third and fourth ones each have an extra vowel. This is because Korean consonant sounds always need a vowel sound partner, unless you make it a final consonant, which is at the bottom in a Korean syllable. If you like to sound a bit more sophisticated, you could call these extra vowels as apenthetic vowels. Beside the change in syllabic structure and pronunciation, the major change these extra vowels cause is on the number of syllables. If we go back again to the examples of complicated syllabic structures, whilst the English ones have 1 vowel nucleus each, which make them 1-syllable words or monosyllabic, their Korean transcriptions have more than 1 vowel nucleus, which make them multisyllabic. This leads us well to a discussion for the second question, which was, are the number of vowels equivalent to the number of syllables? Well, under the premises that these are vowel sounds, not letters, one vowel sound includes a diphthong, a vowel with two sounds, and it includes the final sonorant. There is a condition for this though. I would say that they are equivalent. Although the first premise was already touched on under the question 1, the first question, since the examples there are all monosyllabic, that's one syllable words. Here I will demonstrate using some multisyllabic ones, that's words with two or more syllables. So, these are some random multisyllabic words that came up in my mind. Using these words, we will explore why counting the vowel letters could be unreliable to identify the syllables. First, let's identify the consonants and vowels based on its spelling. Since it is to do with the letters, we will write them in the lower cases. This time, let's identify the consonants and vowels according to the sounds. Please be aware that I did not include the stress marks in these transcriptions. Next, we will split each according to the chunks that we can hear. And then see whether each chunk follows any of the possible syllabic structures from the question number 1. The first word, doctor, can be split up into two sound chunks. The second word, expensive, can be split up into three sound chunks. Here, for the sounds, I had to split the sound for the letter X into two parts, K and S, because of a rule of splitting that I will be mentioning in question 3. The third word, teacher, can be split up into two sound chunks. And the last word, ready, can be split up into two sound chunks. Since having more than one consonant in a syllable is very normal in English, the simplest question that we could ask ourselves to check if these are correct as syllables is, does each sound chunk contain one vowel only? When the words are written in sounds, you can see that each part has one vowel only, whereas for the ones in letters, there are some extra vowels. Either because two vowel letters work together to produce one sound, like EA in teacher and ready, or being silent, like the last E in expensive. Also, there is a special consonant letter that sounds like a vowel, Y in ready. Because of these cases, identifying the number of syllables based on the number of vowel letters is not so reliable. For the second premise, I would like you to take a look at these words. Since we have confirmed that switching the letters into sounds is important, I would write their transcriptions as the first step in advance to the exploration. Once again, I did not include stress marks to focus on identifying the number of syllables. If you apply the rule of a syllabic structure that one syllable can only have one vowel sound, how many syllables do each of these words have? Apparently, there are 3 vowels for the last word, which may indicate that it is a 3-syllable word, and the rest of them seem to be 2-syllable words. Well, this is almost true when they are written in Korean transcriptions. However, what we did not take into account here was the presence of diphthongs. Diphthong is a combination of 2 monophthongs within the same syllable that begins with one sound and ends with another. That is, the mouth shape also changes. The diphthongs in Korean literally look like they are staying within one syllable, but in English, they may be deceived as 2 separate sounds because of how they look. Then, how can we differentiate between 2 separate vowel sounds and diphthongs? As a rule of thumb, you just need to check if the last vowel sound ends with the weak vowels like I, or U, when you see there are more than one vowel sounds. If you apply this, you will find out that near contains a diphthong ear, so it is a 1-syllable word in fact. Care contains a diphthong air, so it is also a 1-syllable word. Chaos contain a diphthong a and an extra vowel sound o, which make it a 2-syllable word. And lastly, neon does not have any diphthong but 2 separate vowel sounds, so it remains as a 2-syllable word. Now, I suppose that when you see this third premise, you might have no idea about what this means because of the word sonorant. Sonorants usually refer to the consonant sounds produced without the air blocking or leaking. Sometimes sonorants do include vowels, but for the sake of convenience, I will refer to that as resonance when necessary. These include w, y, m, l, and r. Another key term I shall mention here is the obstruents, which have the opposite meaning to the sonorants, as they are the consonant sounds produced by blocking or leaking the airstream. And they refer to the rest of the consonant sounds. And what I found is that an unstressed syllable can be formed when or u amongst the sonorants is at the coda position, and it is preceded by an obstruent at the onset position. You may think, how can a syllable have no nucleus? And in fact, the nucleus is hidden here, which is the schwa sound. I remember this used to be transcribed in the dictionaries, and some dictionaries might still do, but recently I see a lot without it. Examples include happen, ribbon, cattle, idle, rhythm, mechanism. One thing to note is that this is counted as a syllable when it is at the final position of the words, but when it is at the beginning or the middle, it tends to be not counted as a syllable, with the schwa sound being completely deleted, such as these examples. The first one, which tends to be reduced from 2 syllables, police, to 1 syllable, please. The second one, which tends to be reduced from 3 syllables, chocolate, to 2 syllable, chocolate. The third one, which tends to be reduced from 3 syllables, family, to 2 syllables, family. And the last one, which tends to be reduced from 3 syllables, history, to 2 syllables, history. Finally, the last question was, how can we split a multisyllabic word into the syllables? This process of splitting is called syllabification. And thankfully again, whilst we have a very explicit syllabification system in Korean, it may not always be easy in English because of the broad possibilities. For example, if the word has one consonant sound in the middle, like predict or token, it means this could either be a coda of the first syllable or an onset of the second syllable. If the word has 2 consonant sounds in the middle, like ranking and apply, they might be split up into each side, coda and onset, or both be the coda of the first syllable, or both be the onset of the second syllable. If the word has 3 consonant sounds in the middle, like pumpkin, all could be the coda of the first syllable, or all could be the onset of the second syllable. Or they could split up into 2 sides in 2 ways, 1 as the coda, 2 as the onset, or 2 as the coda, 1 as the onset. And lastly, if the word has 4 consonant sounds in between, there are possibilities like all as the coda, 1 as the coda, and the rest as the onset, being aware that the maximum number of consonants as the onset is 3, half as the coda and the other half as the onset, 1 as the onset and the rest as the coda. Before this gives you a serious migraine, let me share a procedure for the syllabification. Here are the 3 steps that I came up with after some readings. And please note that it is just a simple version, as this is the area that is hard to generalize. We will be practicing this procedure throughout the course. And if it does not work, we will figure out the things to note and make the modifications. Okay, so let's apply each step to syllabify the examples from earlier. 1. Identify the nuclei, that's the vowels, in the word. I have already shown the vowel sounds in black in the transcriptions. 2. From the back of the word, syllabify according to the maximal onset principle. And here, the maximal onset principle means that when consonant sounds have a choice between the coda and the onset, they prefer to be the onset. If we apply this without judging if they are actually valid at the moment, it will look like this. 3. Check the syllabification using the sonority sequencing principle and rearrange if necessary. Here, the sonority sequencing principle needs to be explained first. Sonority is like the loudness of a sound, how much does it resonate? And the sonority sequencing principle indicates that where there is a nucleus as the highest in sonority, the onset tends to show a rise from low to high in sonority, and the coda tends to show the opposite, a fall from high to low in sonority. We can find out the sonority of each sound class using a scale like this, 1 being lowest, 11 being highest. Let me show you roughly how it works using a word blank. First, the nucleus A is a low vowel, so it has the level 11 sonority. Then B and L are the onset, which can be illustrated like this. Then N and K are the coda, which can be illustrated like this. Can you see that the consonants that are closer to the nucleus are higher in sonority than the ones that are further? The consonant clusters mostly follow this principle, which is why an initial consonant cluster like U instead of BL does not exist, and the final consonant cluster like K instead of NK does not exist. One exception in English is the S sound, as it can form the initial consonant clusters like ST, SK, and SP, as well as the final consonant clusters like TS, KS, and PS. So the S is considered as a special case. Now, let's see the validity of each syllable with our knowledge of the consonant clusters first. We can keep the first two words as they are, since they do not have any consonant cluster. For the third one, ranking, NK doesn't seem to be valid as an initial consonant cluster, so we can shift N to the coda of the first syllable. The fourth one, apply, seems to be fine as it is, since the initial consonant cluster pl exists. For the fifth one, pumpkin, there is no such consonant cluster like mpk or pk. So mp, which does exist as the final consonant cluster, can shift to the coda of the first syllable. Last but not least, the exclude seems to be fine, since the initial consonant cluster does exist. What do you think? The issue could have been, how do you know whether the consonant cluster exists or not? And I will probably deal with it in another time. Anyway, we could also go further by testing the validity of these using the sonority scale. Firstly, the sonority of components in predict. Next, the sonority of components in token. Thirdly, the sonority of components in ranking. Fourthly, the sonority of components in apply. After that, the sonority of components in pumpkin. And finally, the sonority components in exclude. Except for the word exclude with this special S, we have verified that all the onsets show increase in sonority and all the codas show decrease in sonority. This type of analysis will be practiced as we come across any multisyllabic words. In conclusion, in the main lessons, you will be able to explore, but not limited to, the differences in pronunciation due to different syllabic structure of English and Korean, differences between the number of syllables on dictionary and on daily life, and the differences in pronunciation due to the different groupings of the syllables. I hope this lesson gave you some insights about syllables. And I will be back soon with the last part of Unit 0 lesson, which is on stresses. Thank you very much for watching.